Wow. I mean, this quote from Sarah Yeager, a former senior advisor at the Joint Chiefs of Staff, it really says it all, doesn't it? This isn't just an outsider's criticism. It's a loss of faith from someone who was inside the very institutions that conduct these wars. It tells you right away that this issue is personal and it's profound.
So, to really get a handle on why that trust is so shattered, we've got to look at a recent, tragic case that brought the human cost of these errors into painfully sharp focus.
What's so incredible here, when you look at it, is the timeline. For weeks, the official story was that this was a righteous strike, a success. It took painstaking work by journalists to uncover the truth. The target wasn't a terrorist, he was an aid worker. And the victims, they included 7 children. This wasn't just some unavoidable accident, it was a complete catastrophic failure of intelligence, and then a failure of transparency on top of it.
And that's the thing, right? Tragedies like the Kabul strike, they're not supposed to happen. There's a whole international legal framework, a set of rules designed specifically to prevent him. And it all starts with the very definition of what a war crime is.
So the term we're talking about is war crimes, and this definition comes straight from the 4th Geneva Convention. You've got to pay attention to the wording here. Phrases like willful, not justified by military necessity, and carried out unlawfully and wantonly. The point is, this isn't about the unavoidable fog of war. It's about actions that cross a very clear legal and moral line.
And look, the list of what's prohibited is crystal clear. We're not talking about vague guidelines here. These are hard and fast rules, explicit prohibitions against everything from willful killing to taking hostages. The rules are right there, on the books, in black and white.
So that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? If the rules are so clear, if they're written down for everyone to see, why does this keep happening? Well, the answer isn't simple, and it points to some really deep systemic problems.
Well, it turns out the Kabul strike wasn't some one-off tragedy. It was actually the result of a pattern of really deep systemic flaws that have been documented over and over again for years.
Okay, so the first big flaw is something we can all fall into. It's called confirmation bias. Think about it. In a super high-pressure situation, the drone operators were already expecting to see a threat, so that's what they saw. In their minds, harmless water jugs suddenly looked like explosives. They saw what they expected to see, not what was actually there. And we need to be clear about something. This isn't just about bombs going off course. More often than not, it's about deliberately striking the wrong person. In fact, get this, a study showed that for a 5-year period, the majority of civilian casualties came from misidentifying civilians as targets. The system for figuring out who is clearly breaking down.
And if that wasn't bad enough, when things do go wrong, the way they investigate it is, well, it's also broken. The military's own investigators almost never talk to outside sources, the actual witnesses on the ground. When you're only looking at your own data, you end up with this dangerous feedback loop where mistakes just get reinforced.
And the result of all these flawed investigations? You get this absolutely staggering gap between what's really happening and what's being reported. Just look at the campaign against ISIS. The official U.S. military count was 152 civilian deaths. Independent monitoring groups, they counted at least 1,500. Just let that sink in for a second. We're talking about a 90% discrepancy.
So here's the thing. We can't just chalk this up to isolated mistakes by folks on the ground. We have to look higher up the chain of command, at the policies, the power structures, and the leaders who create the conditions for these tragedies to happen, and who, so often, seem to escape any real accountability.
All right, to see how this works, let's take a look at the career of one man, Major General Jeffrey Miller. This dossier, which was part of a legal case in Spain, lays out exactly how he helped develop and export some of the most controversial interrogation techniques of the post-9/11 era.
You can literally trace how this happened, step by step. First, Miller takes over at Guantanamo Bay, calling it a battle lab. His words, not mine. Then he brings in these so-called enhanced techniques. Next thing you know, he's sent to Iraq to Gitmoize the prisons there. And his recommendations are adopted right before the Abu Ghraib scandal blows up. I mean, you can draw a straight line from the policies he created to the abuses that happened.
And this is where the double standard, the accountability gap just becomes impossible to ignore. On the one hand, you have Lieutenant William Calley. He was on the ground, he ordered the My Lai massacre, and he was convicted of murder. But what about Major General Miller, the guy who literally wrote the playbook that led to abuses in Abu Ghraib? He faced zero legal repercussions. He got to retire with full honors, even after a military report said he should be held accountable.
And if you think this is a recent problem, well, it's not.
Tragically, this pattern goes way back. In 1944, a simple navigational error sent U.S. bombers over a school in Milan, Italy, killing 184 children. The unit got some internal criticism, but just like in so many cases since, there were no real repercussions.
So the big question is, are we just stuck in this awful cycle of mistakes, tragedy, and then nothing? Well, maybe not. Human rights groups and even some reformers inside the system have laid out a pretty clear path for how to fix this. The good news is, the proposed solutions really get to the heart of the problem. They're calling for things like independent reviews, so it's not just the military investigating itself. They want an honest acknowledgement of systemic flaws like confirmation bias. They want real accountability for everyone, no matter their rank. They want to make it easier for victims to even report harm in the first place. And maybe most importantly, to actually learn from 20 years of painful, hard-won data.
And really, it all comes down to this. After that Kabul drone strike, a Pentagon spokesman insisted it wasn't a result of negligence or poor leadership. But as critics were quick to point out, a persistent lack of due care, well, that's pretty much the definition of negligence. And a persistent failure to stop it, that's a failure of leadership.
And that leaves us with a really tough question for the future. As war becomes more and more remote, fought with joysticks and screens from thousands of miles away, can we actually design a system that puts accountability back in? Can we ever truly prevent the next tragic mistake?